The main thing about food wastage is that it's an incredible scale all around the world, but particularly in the UK, we throw away about half of the food that we have.
The population of the world stands, something like 6 billion now, expected to rise to something like 9 billion in 2050. So we know that we've got many more mouths to feed. If we halved the food we waste, we'd be able to cut the required generation of food by a quarter.
A lot of food doesn't even make it to the shelves of the supermarkets because the supermarkets are very particular about the fruit and veg, especially that gets to their shelves. Everything has to be a certain size, a certain shape.
Morally, it's absolutely indefensible, but the pressures on these guys with health and safety and everything are so immense that that's what they're going to do. Until somebody actually uses a modicum of common sense, then it's not going to change. But the fact that some people are throwing food away and some people are doing without food is totally and utterly unjustifiable.
The figures that come out of it's the Waste and Resources Action Programme, it's the government delivery body on waste. They've produced some figures for different sections of the UK and the amount of waste that they're producing. They estimate that 2/3 of all food waste arises in households, about 27% arises at manufacture, and it's just under 7% arises at retail.
We found households in the UK waste 8.3 million tonnes of food. So that's a huge impact.
Any idea how much 8.3 million tonnes is?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. I have no idea how much it is. All I know is it's like, oh, somebody here, Mike, go on.
I know. Does anyone know the Wembley Stadium?
Yeah.
How big is that?
Big.
Really big.
It's massive.
Okay, so if I filled that 8 times with food, that's how much we throw away per year.
That's a lot, isn't it?
I believe we have a huge responsibility to look after the resources that we have left in the world. And every time I think about it, I'm horrified about the amount of time and energy put into food and the resources that it takes to create that food and put it on your plate. I'm horrified to think that that would go to waste.
Where do you think it ends up? There you go, young man. Landfill, that's a really good one. In Lewisham though, we're quite lucky. We don't have to put any of that stuff into landfill. But I'll tell you about that in a second. Anybody else have any ideas? Has anybody heard of an incinerator before? Incinerator, yeah? In Lewisham, we burn all of our refuse, basically. Anything that goes into your black bin at home gets burned. However, in other boroughs, pretty much it goes to landfill, as the young man said. Now, just because you think it's going to landfill and it's a bit of food and it will go in the ground and it will harmlessly decompose, that's not actually right. It actually produces methane when it's decomposing in the ground, which is a really harmful greenhouse gas.
We know now that there's something like only about 7 years' worth of landfill capacity left in Britain. We simply cannot continue to plough waste into the ground. And this food waste scheme came specifically from our intention to implement a landfill diversion project. So it's not just the fact that we wanted food waste, we wanted to minimise the amount of waste we were putting in the ground. Well, the council has a waste management strategy and it has certain targets within that strategy. And one of the targets is to reach eventually around 50 to 60% recycling. And to get to those figures, we knew that we would have to do something different than we were already doing. So when we tendered for our new contract for waste and recycling, we did ask those companies tendering to give us their ideas of how they could help us reach our targets. And one of the ideas that we've developed from that is the food waste scheme. it's a weekly service. We will collect the curbside caddies, tip those into our slave bins, into our vehicles, and off they go for composting. And that service takes all food waste of every description.
Food waste that comes in from Norwich is pure food. It's the only pure food contract that I have. The other two main supplies are mixed green and food waste. Food waste content of the whole mix is normally around about 20%. Food waste deliveries from Norwich are around about 20 tonnes a day. Other deliveries are around about 100 tonnes a day, so 120 tonnes a day, around about 600 tonnes a week is what we're having in. Compost that's going out at the moment is going directly to a farmer who is spreading it as we're taking it, and it's going to grow and help grow a crop of potatoes. Vivaldi, if you're into your spuds.
Because we live in fairly affluent times, I think we forget to respect food. And I mean, food is so readily available, whether it's seasonal or not. It is always around. We can always just pop down to the shops and get something, even if it's out of season. Whereas, for instance, with my parents, they grew up in the era of just after the Second World War. And of course there were rations and what have you, and things were just a lot tougher.
You see, we weren't allowed to waste anything. I mean, there was a big poster around up in the War Museum where I work up there at voluntary. It was waste not, want not, and I think it's a well-known saying, but you daren't waste any food because Mum would say, well, you can't waste that, you've got to eat that. That's hard to come by. And now what I've said to the children growing up and the grandchildren, don't waste it. You've never gone through the war like I have, and a lot of us. We could not afford to waste the food. We had to eat it, so don't even think of putting that in the bin.
You see so many people in the supermarket, and I know we have busy lives, that rush around, they fill up the trolley, they go home. I've done it myself, and you look at what you've bought and you think, what did I buy that for? Or have I actually got a meal out of this, or have I just got loads of things to put in the cupboard? And it really is about thinking in advance about what your needs are for the next few days, the next week. It's also about perhaps looking beyond the supermarkets at local shops and local producers where you can buy small quantities of fresh fruit and vegetables, for instance, that you're going to eat in the next couple of days, rather than pre-packed things. You've got the issues with the packaging. You've also got the fact that perhaps you bought too many because they were in a larger pack, and then you have to throw some of those away. People just, I think, need to think in advance about what they're going to buy and what they're going to eat in the next few days.
And maybe you guys, probably, not many of you, I'm assuming, cook the Sunday roast dinner. You do cook the Sunday roast dinner?
Yeah.
Do you sometimes cook too much?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you prepare too much food, and that's one of the biggest things.
Planning a meal or planning several meals, ideally for a whole week, saves an awful lot of time already, because you're not trying to make those decisions on the fly or getting stuck at the supermarket not knowing what to buy or what have you.
Love Food, Hate Waste is just a really modern way of saying use your common sense, plan, a bit of creativity. It's about using what you have in your cupboards rather than going out and buying more of the same stuff. And it can save you 500 quid a year, which is absolutely fantastic for actually spending less money. What we're going to do today is cook with stuff that you will probably find in your cupboards, fridges, freezers, somewhere like that. It's not a set in stone recipe. You do not have to follow this religiously and say, that's what that guy told me in Oldham that day, because what you do is take what you have got and utilise that.
And I think it's all just an education process. When I was at school, we actually did teaching, and we learnt how to do home economics, and we had cookery courses and cookery classes, and they don't have them these days.
It's incumbent on schools. It's a life skill that has been sadly neglected at the moment, and I think the sad fact is that people now go food shopping and really don't have the confidence to say, that's good, that's bad, I don't want that, I do want that. And I think whoever teaches them, it's got to be done, and it's got to be done pretty quick.
Do you have access to the internet? Yes. Yeah, on the back of all of these, we've got this website here. It's got hundreds of different recipes, loads of tips about what you can actually freeze. It's very important for us to reduce waste primarily rather than just recycle waste. So what I do is try and get that message out there. As soon as they find out what it is that you're talking about and what the message is that you're trying to get across, they become very, very interested, and they're very, very keen to try and rectify that, try and learn as much as they can, and get something out of the campaign, get something out of the education.
A lot of the campaigns at the moment focusing on waste are focusing on the consumer. The Love Food, Hate Waste is focused at them. However, actually the businesses are probably far more of the problem, and they are seeing far less action and policy being directed at them to make them reduce their waste.
Supermarket policies, yeah, I mean these guys have all got really firm environmental commitments. This is a fiercely competitive issue for retailers. Looking at Marks and Spencer's with Plan A, there's a big commitment to absolutely do the right thing. That's not just about winning points with the consumer in terms of being the ethical place to shop. It's also about the right thing for a business to do over the longer term. So we're looking at sustainability. If businesses are still around in 2050 that are around today, they will look completely different. We've got to achieve carbon emission reductions of 80% by 2050. We're going to have a radical overhaul in the way that we do business.
We've got our food, something in the cupboard or in the fridge or in the freezer. Have you noticed that some of them have labels with dates on them?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, I'm going to ask you, you've got to put your hands up, and we're going to go through and you're going to tell me what you think these labels mean, okay? Who knows what the use by date means?
So people talk about sell by, use by, best before, display until. We now most commonly have got rid of display until and sell by. The two dates that we have are best before and use by. Best before is exactly that. It's best before this particular date. So, a loaf of bread is best before a certain date. After that date, it might go green, but it won't kill you. It will just be unpleasant and you won't want to eat it. It's best before that date. For a use by date, that really is use it by that date, and after that date, it becomes an issue of food safety. So for products that are past a use by, we cannot do anything about that. Food safety is paramount. We absolutely need to be sure that we're providing good quality, safe food to customers. We can't have food scares on our hands. For best befores, we do have a slightly different situation, and for much of that food, all of the supermarkets have a relationship with Fair Share, which is the charity that distributes food that maybe is approaching or just past its best before, so that does get eaten.
Is that right? No. Downside.
Last year we gave out the equivalent of 6.7 million meals to people, and every day about 29,000 people in Britain eat food that's come from Fair Share. Any food that comes into our network is good to eat and is the same thing that you or I would buy in a shop. We work with all of the major supermarkets and retailers here and a lot of the major manufacturers, so it's about us sourcing this food from them, saying to them, we know that you have waste in your supply chain, make sure that it comes to us. And then it's about us providing it to the community food members and to our depots. So it's about kind of making that food available. We have about 330 different volunteers around the whole network, and they do a variety of different things.
I come in, I receive food, so we receive a whole heap of bread that you saw over there. Received a whole heap of food from M&S, go through it, sort what needs to go out that day. Then we start allocating, working out what goes out to different projects, and then from there it gets picked, goes onto the vans, and then people go out on the vans, deliver it out. At the end of the day they collect some more food, bring it back here, and then we sort everything out and get ready for the next day.
For retailers, this is fiercely competitive. Retail is a fiercely competitive industry. Wasting food is a waste of money. You want to sell as much of it as you possibly can. For the stuff that you do then eventually end up wasting, and inevitably there will be some, you want to maximise the value out of it.
Hey, excuse me, we're just doing the collection for the local homeless hostel again. I mean, all of this food has just been on sale literally until like an hour ago, so it's all obviously fine. Basically what we do is take food that would have been thrown away by businesses, then we take that food and we take a very simple idea to give that to the hungry. We'll have to keep those in our mouth. I think it's going to be very tempting. We're never going to be able to cook all that stuff. The beautiful thing about Food Not Bombers is that it's a non-hierarchical organisation, so we don't report to a head office. You just take the idea, which is available to anyone. You can find the idea online or in booklets. We'll just give you kind of general advice for what to do, and then you can just go out and do that in your own community.
I thought maybe mashed potatoes with carrots. Well, it's a typical Dutch dish, but it's not very popular, but I really like it.
We look at what we've got. There's a kind of ready, steady cook feel to proceedings, just because we don't know what we're going to get each week, so we just have to run with it. There are about 4 million people who are going hungry almost next door to this food being thrown out. So whilst, say, a Tesco's, a supermarket, will be throwing out, say 30 crates worth of food, next door there might be a homeless shelter with lots of people.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of people tend to forget what it takes to produce the food in the first place. I mean, we're talking about tending the land, we're talking about producing the food on the land, maintaining it, transporting it, keeping it at the right temperature, displaying it in the shops, getting us to the shops. All of those things take up energy and resources. And so it's not just the little bit of food that's sitting on your plate, it's the huge wider picture. And I think that's incredibly important to remember when we're talking about food waste.
My personal view is it's a sin that we generate all this food waste, and we need to be more effective at communicating with consumers that they're simply throwing money out of their own pocket, regardless of the environmental impact, regardless whether they care or not about climate change, regardless whether they believe in climate change. They're throwing money away by wasting their own food.
So if we can educate people to buy properly, maybe do a shop 2-3 times a week, as opposed to going and getting one of those humongous trolleys and have it overflowing because it's a bit more convenient. It's just all about education, and it is very difficult because people lead such very busy lives. At the end of the day,